let's quickly get back to verse 5, where the Bible says, and the king of the south shall be strong. Well, let's go back to verse 4. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken. So remember, we talked about Alexander the Great. And we talked about the fact that God predicted that he would come. The prophecy earlier in Daniel was, remember, he's the big horn. That horn would be broken. There would be 4 horns, the 4 sections of the Greek Empire after Alexander. So this is another reference to the fact that Greece will take over after Persia, led first by Alexander the Great. But why would Alexander pass over Israel? Why would he not defeat Israel? And Josephus, the Jewish historian, gives us an amazing story about why that happened. So when Alexander began his campaign against Persia in like the 330s BC, he swept across present-day Turkey. He came down through Syria, and he overtook the cities of, well, there's several important cities there, Damascus, but also Tyre. Tyre was an island, and it was impregnable. The Assyrians years before could not overtake Tyre. Even Nebuchadnezzar, as great and powerful as he was, could not defeat Tyre, nor could Persia. But even though they besieged it for years, but Alexander took it over in just a short period of time, like 5 months. He took it over by actually building a bridge. He threw rubble in the water and built a bridge to Tyre. Just an amazing story. You can read about that in the history books. Well, Alexander continued his way south, and he was making his way toward Egypt. They were the next big foe to attack. And it would seem as if Israel would just be a small little nondescript battle on the way. I mean, Israel, humanly speaking, was not strong. This would be nothing for Alexander and the great army of Greece to overtake. And Alexander had promised the soldiers from Syria and from Phoenicia that had joined his army, because that was one of the elements of Alexander's strategy, is everywhere he went, he would add to his army people that wanted to join with him. And he had promised the Syrians and the Phoenicians that when they got to Israel, because they were neighbors of Israel, that he would allow them to just do what they wanted with Israel. They were chomping at the bit. They wanted to kill the priest and kill the people of Jerusalem and plunder the city. So they were just ready. So Alexander is on his way toward Jerusalem. Now, you can only imagine how upset the people of Jerusalem were. And Jaduah, the high priest, was so upset. He was so afraid because he had already made some bad moves when it came to Greece, and he was already on Alexander's bad side because of some of his political chicanery. So he was thinking, what am I going to do? He asked the people to pray. He offered sacrifices to God. He expressed some humility. And here's what God did. God gave Jaduah a vision. And in that vision, he told Jaduah, don't worry when Alexander comes. As a matter of fact, open the gates of the city, put on your priestly garb, tell all the citizens to dress in white, and when Alexander comes to you, open the gates and you go out and meet him. Now, militarily, logically, that sounds like suicide. But if God tells you to do something, then that's the right thing to do. That's the logical thing to do. And Jaduah does. He trusts God. He obeys God. So picture this. Alexander and his mighty army are coming to ransack Jerusalem. With him are the Phoenicians and the Syrians, and they're bloodthirsty. And what does he see? He sees, as he's getting near Jerusalem, going uphill, because Jerusalem's up high, he sees the priest and the citizens of Jerusalem walking out with white in peace. And Jaduah is wearing all of his high priestly garb. And an interesting thing happens because Alexander the Great steps out from his entourage and walks by himself to greet Jaduah the high priest. And he salutes him. He honors him. And the people gather around him. And the army of Greece and the people of Greece, the Phoenicians and the Syrians, they're scratching their head. Like, what is going on? And Parmenio, who is the second in command to Alexander, says to Alexander, what are you doing? Why would you honor this priest? And Alexander said this, he said, I'm not honoring him, I'm honoring his God. That sounds even more fantastical. What's going on here? Then Alexander told the story. Alexander said, when I was back in the city of Dios, back in Macedonia, I received a vision. And in that vision, I was concerned about my campaign against Persia. Will it work? Should I go? Will I defeat them? And I received this vision. And in this vision, I saw a man. And the man was dressed in priestly garments. And the man was a spokesman from God who told me that I would win this war against Persia. Even though I had a small army, Persia had a great army, I would win. And that man that I saw in those clothes, in that vision, is this man standing right in front of me, Jaduah. This is the vision I saw. What an amazing thing. So what did Jaduah do? He brought Alexander into the city of Jerusalem. They offered sacrifices for Alexander on the altar. The next day, Alexander came to Jaduah and said, what can I do for you? And Jaduah said, well, please allow my people to obey the laws of my God. And Alexander said, done. And then he said, and don't make us pay taxes on the 7th year. And Alexander said, done. And then Alexander said, and by the way, if any of your people want to join my army, I will allow them to keep all of their kosher laws to God. I'll let them follow the laws of the Old Testament ceremonial laws and dietary laws if they join my army. Wow. And then Jaduah showed Alexander the book of Daniel, the very book that we're studying. And he showed him the prophecies that you and I have been talking about. Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, Daniel chapter 9, about how Greece will arise and how the big horn will arise and how Persia will be defeated by Greece. And Alexander's reading the prophecies of Daniel, realizing this is talking about me, and I'm going to win this war, and I'm the man. And that gave him great confidence. And so Alexander left Israel intact because God used Jaduah and this vision to signify to Alexander that God sovereignly was in charge. Now, the interesting thing is, Alexander does indeed go down, defeat Egypt, and come back and defeat Persia. And at 32 years of age in Babylon, Alexander made it all the way to Babylon. That's exactly where Daniel is, right here in Babylon. That's where Alexander ends up dying. Is that not ironic? That the very prophecy that was given to Daniel this day, that he was so upset about, God worked it out where Daniel's written word was the impetus by which Alexander fought, and then he came to Babylon, and right there is where Alexander passed away, prophecy being fulfilled. I mean to tell you folks, you can't make this stuff up. It's unbelievable. And it just gets better and better. Because look at what the Bible says in verse number 5. So Alexander dies, verse 4. Look at verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong. So remember, 4 kings arise after Alexander. and two of them come into specific Bible view. The king of the south, that would be Egypt, and then the king of the north, that would be Syria. And remember, Israel, if you look at a map, is smack dab between those two. So Israel, for the next 130 years after Alexander, is always going to be under the control of either the king of the south, the kings of the south, or the king of the north and his offspring. And there's always going to be this tension between the two of them. The kings of the south are the Ptolemies, P-T-O-L-M, Ptolemy, and the kings of the north are the Seleucids, named after their first ruler, Ptolemy in the south and Seleucus in the north. Okay, so look at verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him. So one of his princes was Seleucus. He was a prince of the Ptolemies, but he rebelled against Ptolemy and he went to Syria, and that's where that tension arose. So you've got the king of the south, the Ptolemy, the king of the north, Seleucus, and now their offspring, the two different kingdoms. And the Bible says, he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Verse 6, and in the end of years, they shall join themselves together. So there's going to be this tension between the king of the south and the king of the north, but that tension is going to be resolved temporarily through an agreement, a treaty they make, ratified by a marriage. That would often happen in the Bible, that when countries wanted to form an alliance, they would marry their daughters and their sons to each other. Remember, Ahab and Jezebel had their daughter Athaliah, who married the son of Jehoshaphat, whose name was Jehoram, and they wanted to make this alliance between Israel and Judah. It was very unwise for Jehoshaphat to do, but that was often the case. So was the case with Solomon. Remember, Solomon made all of those alliances with all these other nations with these wives. It was unwise, but it's what he did. Okay, so here, the king of the south is giving his daughter, so at this point, the king of the south is a man by the name of Ptolemy II. He has a daughter by the name of Berenice. We'd say Bernice today, but Berenice. And then the king of the north at this point is a king by the name of Antiochus II. Now remember, we talked about Antiochus Epiphanes some time ago. We're going to talk about him again. Remember, he's a precursor to the Antichrist. We'll talk about him later. Okay, try to get all this. I know we're getting deep right now. So the king of the south, his name is Ptolemy II. He has a daughter named Berenice. The king of the north, his name is Antiochus II. He marries Ptolemy II's daughter. So Antiochus II is married to Berenice. Well, after a while, Ptolemy II, Berenice's dad, dies. So as long as they're married and as long as Ptolemy II, the father of the bride, is alive, everything's good. But when Ptolemy II dies, now Antiochus kind of gets cold feet. So he's like, I'm going to go back to my first wife, because he had kind of put his first wife on the shelf. Her name is Laodice. So he divorces Berenice. I mean, this is like a soap opera. He divorces Berenice and he goes back to Laodice. But here's the kicker. Laodice is now suspicious of Antiochus II, which, well, she should be. So she poisons her husband. And I don't mean to laugh, but she poisons her husband, and so Antiochus II dies. He's poisoned. He's assassinated by his wife, Laodice. Well, she's now intimidated because here's this Berenice, who is divorced, who now has an infant son. So Laodice has Berenice and her son and all of her attendants killed, assassinated. This Laodice lady, she is like cold-blooded. I mean, she is cold-blooded. And then she lets her son, Laodice has a son, she calls him Seleucus II, and he becomes the king over the north. So suffice it to say that the alliance that the north and the south have with each other was short-lived. Okay, look at verse 6 in closing. Verse 6 in closing. So in the end of years, they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south, that was Berenice, shall come to the king of the north, that was Antiochus II, to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm. Remember, Berenice was divorced from Antiochus. Neither shall he stand. Remember, Antiochus was poisoned by his first wife, Laodice. Nor his arm, but she shall be given up, they that brought her, and he that begat her, he that strengthened her in these times. So, again, all of this happened just as the Bible explained. Now, the Bible didn't give names and dates, but it's so specific that everything fit just exactly the way the Bible said. Now, this soap opera is not over. We're going to talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. But if all that's confusing to you, I would say two things. Number one, if you're interested, do more reading. It really is amazing. Number two, if all of it's just kind of confusing, at least let it be an exclamation point to you that God keeps his word, God is in the details, no detail escapes God, and God has it all under control, including your life. And that's the good news for all of us. So tomorrow we'll jump back into it. Last day of the week that we'll have podcast, obviously, Friday. And we'll see if we can get this little portion to a conclusion and introduce the main character who's coming in just a day or two. God bless you, my friends. Have a great day in the Lord, and we'll see you tomorrow.